All right, so here we go. This is now objective 5. The 1920s. If you can see there, this is a big cartoon character. His name was Felix the Cat. He was everywhere in the 1920s. Also, Felix the Cat's kind of made a comeback, if you will, in recent years because in the 1980s, well, that's not recent, but there was a Felix the Cat cuckoo clock on the wall in Back to the Future, and if you've watched Stranger Things, um, there's a lot of Back to the Future things mentioned there, and in fact, there is one of those clocks on the wall. So, Felix the Cat continues to inspire almost 100 years later. Now, objective 5.1 is radio and cinema. Um, Guys, this picture on the right here, this was like a happening evening in the house on like a Friday night. You see the little girls like thrilled. But this is radio. This is what people did. This is how they got their entertainment back in the 1920s. So 1920s radio is where we got to go. Mass media of the day. It's going to begin to replace the newspapers. The biggest radio station was KDK, Pittsburgh First Broadcast Network. We often forget about it, but some of the ones that came after we remember: CBS, NBC, ABC, which later become TV stations. Comic strips from the newspapers were so popular that they're going to become these radio shows, and then they also begin to start specializing. We have a new thing called a soap opera, which is targeted to the female population at home. Call them soap operas because they were trying to sell laundry detergent to the women staying at home, and they had a message behind them. Family time was again around the radio. Now, the 1920s cinema, and you have all these kind of high point here. So from the 20s, really going to about the 50s, is what we call the golden age of Hollywood. Some of the big ones, we have Charlie Chaplin and the Marx Brothers as staples of the silent era. I'm looking so I can tell you where they're at here. Okay. The Marx Brothers on the top row, way up at the top. They're going to be the second one from the right there. And I don't think I see Charlie Chaplin, making sure. No. But there are certain other ones, okay? The Jazz Singer, which portrayed Al Jolson, was the first talkie or movie with sound. And the first big time movie studio was MGM, which was the one with the famous lion that roars at the beginning. But this was a good way for people to get out and kind of experience things. No CGI here, guys. No, special effects, anything like that. If you look down there in that third row, fourth in is Alfred Hitchcock, who made quite possibly some of the scariest movies known to man, and didn't have any CGI. I would be fearful to see what he could come up with CGI. All right. Now, 1920s advertising. 1920s after each World War, we have this boom in consumerism, people buying, and so people begin to start doing this. Here is a Maxwell House coffee from the 1920s. You can see there's such a more to pay for greater satisfaction. 1920s seen as part of a prosperous society, but the reality is for some it was, and they indulged or gave in to the finer things. The mass society wanted other things, and advertise it was marketed at them. Now, objective 5.2, the literary movements in the 1920s, and there's so much to be said here, if you will. This generation was called the Beautiful and the Damned, which was a phrase they got from a book of one of the big writers, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Now, here we're just getting topics and things. In class, we're going to cover each of these stories and why they kind of pertain into a bigger picture of the 1920s. So, the Lost Generation, this is a group of expatriate writers, meaning they actually left the United States, and they wrote stories of being disillusioned with society, meaning they weren't getting what they thought they should be getting. This is coined by Gertrude Stein. Now, Gertrude Stein is kind of notable not being in this generation, but she actually nominated Adolf Hitler to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner in the 1930s. Now, it didn't happen. There you go. So some of these notable members, we have James Joyce with Ulysses, F. Scott Fitzgerald with Great Gatsby, which you'll read in English, T.S. Eliot, Wasteland, Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea, John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath, William Faulkner, A Mississippian, As I Lay Dying, and then J.R.R. Tolkien, which is the Lord of the Rings, Hobbit fames. All of this would be around this era. Now we also have the Harlem Renaissance, which was a literary movement to expose the ills and discrimination of the time. The debate was, should we have high art, which is classical, or folk art as it is? And again, this goes back to Du Bois and Washington. Du Bois would be the high art, learning the trade, etc., whereas folk art is going to be more of the dialect of the speak, etc. A good example of folk art was Langston Hughes' Dreams Deferred, and he wrote as he heard people speak, and his poems are very interesting to a lot of people because there's a rhythm to it, kind of like you're singing a song. Claude McKay, however, felt about high art, and so you have to the white friends. I put fiends, it should be friends, sorry. You then have Zora Neale Hurston, their eyes were watching God, and again we'll discuss these. And then W.B. Du Bois comes back with a crisis magazine. So Harlem Renaissance kind of big there. Now some other writers, we have H.L. Mencken, who has known as the American Scholar, and he's going to give us one of the big phrases of the 1920s, the Scopes monkey trial. And you can see there's H.L. Mencken with that awesome bowl haircut and part down the middle. If I had my way, no man would be guilty of golf could be able to hold any offers of trust or profit under these United States. We also have Sinclair Lewis, who wrote Babbitt, and he's the first American to get a Nobel Peace Prize for literature. Good stuff there. Now, objective 5.3, mass production and leisure time. And so you see here the little cat. I interrupt your leisure to report a hungry. And you know, naturally you're going to have to get up and feed the cat when they're doing that. Or just don't get a cat. Anyway. Now we have new industrial techniques such as mass production, creating molds and new parts to make a lot of one product that is vastly similar. Example, Ford with the Model T. Famously, Henry Ford said you can have the Model T in any color you want, so long as it is black. It means the only one they have is a black one, okay? Also called this the Tin Lizzie. Anyway, he also has the assembly line, a method to create mass production. In the past, people went to the different stages, and they would actually have people pull the car through different stages of the production line and build it more or less. The Model T is mass-produced cars, which leads to more roads and bridges, and then creates in the suburbs in the 1920s as well. Now, mass production. If you can get stuff done quicker, you have more time for leisure. And so these people begin to need something. And so we have department stores. Macy's is going to be a big department store. And here we have Sears. There's Woolworths, etc. The really big amusement park in New York is Coney Island. And this is actually made 30 years before Disneyland. Disneyland didn't come out until the 1950s. And Disney World doesn't start until the 1970s. But Coney Island is still around. We also have spectator sports. This time the spectator sports were baseball, boxing, and tennis. Tennis being the high-end, baseball kind of being in the medium, and boxing being for the common man, if you will. Golf was not a spectator sport, nor should it be. Now, this was just cool. 1920s Go Extreme. Some of the things they had were called barnstorming, and these were flying circuses to show off aviation skills. The whole idea was to get it low where you could fly it through a barn. And pole sitting, and this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a test of endurance, how long you could sit up on a pole. Now, it's not your rear end on a pole. You can see these people in chairs, etc. There is a world record. I'll look it up for you and tell you about that. But nonetheless, kind of interesting, right? That you would climb these poles, etc. And how do you go to the bathroom? And all kinds of good stuff there. Now, Objective 5.4 is the monetary policy and the stock market. Don't feel bad if you feel like Andy Dwyer here. He still doesn't understand the stock market, and at this point he's afraid to ask. The stock market is something that makes the country basically work, but it is very confusing if you don't know what's going on. So, can there be too much of a good thing? And you can see complaints about overproduction of a product, but yet uses plastic dishes. So just consider that. Now, overproduction is too much of a product. It then becomes a surplus or a leftover, and if it's sitting on a shelf, it does not equal money made for oneself. So there we are. We have all this stuff kind of come to a halt. Now, the stock market, the 1920s version of get rich or die trying. And so you see here the stockbroker saying, "Hello, mom. Yes, is my room still available?" And probably yes. The stock market is not for the weak. Companies put their stock or shares of their company for sale to whomever. Now you have to know when to get in and buy, and they have animal spirits, if you will. But the bull market is a period of rising prices. This is when you want to buy. We have a bear market. This is a period of slumping prices, and this is when you want to get out. The whole idea is to buy a share of a company when it is young and on the ground, and as it starts going and going and going and going, once it reaches its plateau, you want to sell at the high point. Um, it's a lot like it's a lot like gambling. You know, you get that good. You know, or hopefully, if you don't gamble. Number one, don't gamble. But playing cards or something, and you have a good hand, you want to know when to hold the hand, how much to hold the hand, etc. You gauge the room, is this a good time, etc. But even with that, you can end up going broke. Now, a stockbroker, works with an individual and a bank to get in the stock market. Not everyone can just buy out flat. So the bank will actually loan you money to get in the stock market. From there, in the 1920s, they just used speculation. You buy stocks on pure guesses and no advice. This would be like saying, "Oh, I got a flush. What do I do next?" Whatever you want, man. Let it ride. But that's a problem when you do that. There has to be some advice, but there's not. So the Federal Reserve, which we talked about with Woodrow Wilson, has a difficult choice to make with monetary policy. If they inflate the economy, like my 50-cent thing here, thanks to inflation, he's only worth 11 cents now. If everyone more or less has something of a product that's not worth as much. In other words, 50 Cent got played out so quick that in his namesake he's only worth 11 cents because there was too much of him, if you will. But the Federal Reserve can ease the monetary policy, drop the interest rate, create more economic activity, however that leads to inflation. Or they can restrict the monetary policy, which means you raise the interest rate and create more savings. Now, after the crash happens in 1929 and years in the 1930s, the Fed used a restrictive policy. They felt it was better for people to save as much as possible. Now, the problem with that is when you couple that with unemployment, there's nowhere to go. It's digging your own grave or chopping down a tree, and you're in the tree. Let's say you have a tree house, and someone's down there chopping, and they ask you, "Hey, do you want me to chop down this tree with an axe or a chainsaw?" In other words, it's coming down. Do you want it fast or do you want it slow? And so, not an easy thing there. We will get more into that with economics. So if you don't get that, it's okay. We'll come back. Now, objective 5.5, international activity. And so here we have King Andrew Jackson. Says he wants to help the common man, but passes super high tariffs and makes everyone broke. Now I bring this up because the man charged with fixing the Depression is Herbert Hoover, and he is going to sign a tariff bill which is high and actually doesn't not only make everyone in America broke, but everyone in the world. All right, so let's see. So the tariff, right? Tariff is a tax on foreign goods. We've already discussed that. A high tariff would be protective of American goods, whereas a low would be protective of consumers. And so here we have high tariff on what the farmer buys, right? And so here we have the American farmer, and you can see the teeth are really good. And so you have the Hawley-Smoot bill, and Congress is passing this. Now, the problem here is you can see that the horse is going to need to eat too much on what they're buying. And so although this was made to help the farmer, it's not going to work. Now, the Hawley-Smoot tariff raises tariffs on certain items in other countries. The Depression is global, so international trade basically comes to a stop. At the same time, there's a Senator Dawes and a Senator Young in 1924 who are going to come up with a plan to help Germany. France and England are going to put pressure on Germany to pay war reparations. They basically say that if we can get Germany to pay, we can pay like this. They owe the United States money, essentially. The U.S. helps out with the Dawes plan because France and England can't pay until Germany pays. So we lend Germany pay, but because of their inflated economy and everything, it basically evaporates into dust before it gets there. They can't pay when we're out all this money, and no one can pay us back. And so we have this global depression worsening, if you will. Now, in a lot of these countries in Europe, we have totalitarianism, which is a state government that has complete control over religion, the economy, education, family, media. One person controls all aspects of a country's social, economic, or political goals. Three of note: Russia in 1916 will go through the communist or Bolshevik Revolution, and they will become the Soviet Union. Now, Vladimir Lenin, who's going to be the big guy there, will die, and now they'll have communism, and we'll have a man named Joseph Stalin. All right, in Italy is going to come up with a new idea called fascism, and Benito Mussolini, again, will be in charge. And then we've heard of this guy, but Germany is going to borrow fascism and create Nazism and put Adolf Hitler in charge. Now, Objective 5.6, the Jazz Age and Consumerism. And so you can see here Ice Cube making the face. When your credit is so bad, you receive a credit card offer that's pre-declined. So I'm going to talk about credit here. Now, buying without money. The 1920s hot items were cars, refrigerators, vacuums, lawnmowers. Most Americans did not have the cash or savings to pay for these things. Credit was to buy now and pay later, but with interest. The longer you take to pay, the higher the interest is. Now, the installment plan were monthly payments either with or without interest. And so you can see right here, finally paid off my credit card balance, and I'm back in debt. And so much like the 1920s, today is a lot like that. We'll get it to a point where maybe you have a credit card and you get it paid off, and something happens and you got to use it again. And this is now what they call living paycheck to paycheck. It's the same thing we've seen before. Now, the Harlem Renaissance here, I don't know why they coupled these two together, but they did. Harlem Renaissance is the flowering of African American culture in the 1920s. Literature, movies, music, politics, art, etc. The biggest impact is jazz. So jazz becomes the new hip thing. Now, Jazz Age, we have it as Colorblind, and the Cotton Club is the most famous jazz joint. Duke Ellington is a band leader. Louis Armstrong was known for his trumpet and his distinct voice. Bessie Smith is a blues legend, and Cab Calloway is scat music. I'll show you in class a Cab Calloway video. You'll love it. About something the Moocher. I can't remember. Minnie the Moocher. You'll like that one. Trust me. Now, Objective 5.7, the 1920s, we have traditionalism and modernism. And so we have some Game of Thrones here, right? The world will look up and shout, "Save us!" And I'll look down and whisper, "Hodor." Watchmen reference for those who know, who don't know, drag on. The idea is traditionalism will say do one thing, modernism will have this. And so here we have the modernists screaming, "Save us," where the traditional Hodor, we're just going to repeat the same, etc., how that works. So traditionalism is a return to the basics, especially in Christianity. Also a belief in the old way is the right way, and we have conservative viewpoints. There's going to be a clash with modern women. Now, the young girls that broke with traditional values of their mothers were known as flappers, and here's a flapper on the right. And they're also going to come up with a new morality, and where cheating on your spouse became seen as normal. People had they called them sweethearts then, but we would call them a side chick or a side dude, whatever. There it is. Now we have a clash with immigration. Surprise, surprise. When the economy is bad, we kind of tend to lay back into this, and so we already have the Quota Acts we talked about. We return to the nativism. The KKK is the biggest it's ever been, and there is the KKK chapters in every major U.S. city. On top of that, there is the Red Scare, where now communists and foreigners are discriminated upon because they're bringing in communism. We also have the Palmer raids. Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer raids places of high immigrant population and deports those here illegally. Kind of sounds like the ICE raids, immigration custom enforcement of today, with Trump and the conservative things going on there. J. Edgar Hoover will become put in charge of what will eventually become the FBI, We're starting there. And we have probably the thing that encompasses all of this, Sacco and Vanzetti. They are the scapegoats for nativism. They are executed without much evidence, and so there's a big thing there. Now, the clash with prohibition. The modern view was that banning alcohol was okay. Traditionals viewed that alcohol was fine and should not be banned. So, interesting there. We have a lot of dry counties begin to pop up. Closest one to you was Lafayette County, or I would say Lafayette, but Lafayette County, where Oxford, Mississippi is, was actually a dry county till no, I think they stopped being dry a few years ago. We have bootleggers who are going to sell illegal alcohol, like Al Capone or Scarface here, and then they're going to sell them into speakeasies or secret bars that were done there, and a lot of interesting hidden things there. Now, the biggest clash here will be with science, and this is something that has continued to happen today, and you can see evolution not a solution. Genesis is truth. Adam and Eve were not apes, and we have this whole idea. So, the Butler Act was a traditional act. It was banned teaching evolution in Tennessee. You can't do it. John Scopes is a substitute science teacher. He gets fired for breaking this law. He wants it to happen. He knows it's going to happen. Homer Plessy, right? Cause the issue, then happen. Scopes will take the state to court in the Scopes monkey trial. H.L. Mencken gave us that. William Jennings Bryan, from our old Cross of Gold speech, will defend traditionalism. Clarence Darrow of the American Civil Liberties Union will defend modernism. The outcome of this, John Scopes was not allowed to regain his teaching license, but this has started the big thing now where traditionalism and modernism still actually don't get along. And so, there we are. Now, Objective 5.9, representations of the Great Depression. And so you see the American economy in the 1920s, and then you have Jason Momoa, Aquaman, sneaking up, Germany not paying the war debts, and so kind of sneaking up behind on the American economy. Gonna wreck it now. I'm going to wreck it. I'll wreck it, Ralph. Anyway, let's go. Now, do we blame it on Hoover? Now, in class, we'll discuss in the objectives all the presidents, and we'll go through this, etc. But Hoovervilles were shanty towns people lived in after they were evicted. Hoover blankets were old newspapers to cover up on a park bench, and Hoover flags were hanging the inside of your pocket out to show you didn't have any money. So who do we blame it on? Blame it on Hoover. Now, is this fair? The answer is no. It actually started years prior to Hoover with Harding and Coolidge. However, Hoover doesn't do himself any favors by not doing a whole lot. Now, some men were called hobos, and they would go through what was called the poor man's divorce. They'd leave their families, okay? And they were looking for work. They rode the rails, which means they walked the train lines trying to find jobs. And they developed a hobo code, signals to help the hobos find their way around. So there it is. Now, Dorothea Lange is a photographer, and she is going to give a documentary-style picture of the Great Depression to humanize the situation. What that means is, someone may not know what a farmer is going through in the Great Depression, but when you look at the most famous migrant mother here with their kids destitute and the mother looking out, curious, how am I going to survive the next day? This is going to put a face on top of something that is bad. Yes, we've heard of the Great Depression, but what is it actually doing? Well, this is what it looks like. This is an average woman, average kids. This is what they're going through. Now, Grant Wood is a painter. You've probably seen this painting. It's called American Gothic. Now, Gothic means black, etc. And if you actually look at the curtains, they are black, and these people are wearing black. They're mourning the loss of their farm. And so this is the Depression's effect on farmers and how they're going to have to take up their pitchfork and go elsewhere. Now, Hoover's other big blunder, if you will, was the bonus army. World War I veterans were promised a bonus under the new act called the Patman Act. World War I vets needed the money early. We all did. They marched to Washington to demand the bonus early. They set up a Hooverville at the Capitol. Hoover is going to order the army, the enlisted army, on the army, the veterans. And that's the picture we have here. And this does not help Hoover's chance for re-election. He's basically on his way out, if you will. Now, 5.10, I think this is the last one. The Dust Bowl. Okay, Dust Bowl 5.10. If you like college football games, again, like college football, the Dust Bowl is the only bowl with no commercials. Do you like that one? That was good. So here we go. The Dust Bowl begins around 1932, Great Plains area, and it forces farmers to leave their farms behind. And here you have that meme of "Go outside," Mom said. "It'll be fun," Mom said. Um, that's not fun. Now the farmers are going to migrate to California. They're going to move west. The Mexican and the other workers there nicknamed them Okies, meaning they came from Oklahoma. Also called them Arkies from Arkansas. They will fight over jobs and money. Now John Steinbeck is going to write two very famous books documenting this story. One is called The Grapes of Wrath. The other one is called Of Mice and Men. Um, and there you go with Objective 5.